Choose Brewery. Isn't this a great venue to hold a town hall in? Thank you for that. And of course, our sponsorship and presenting partners, Miller Lumber and Sunwest Builders, for making this happen each week. Thank you. Like we said, this is our legislative outlook together in this room. So you have every opportunity tonight to get to your questions and engage one another, but most particularly these three gentlemen up here. When that happens, we've only got the one mic in the room. You have every right to just go ahead and use your voice without the microphone, but please be mindful, you need to project loudly and clearly. We'd really love it if you would just go ahead, stand up and say your name, who you're with if you'd like, and just get right to your question. I know often we have opinions, we like to start things, getting to the question will allow other people in the room to take advantage of tonight's opportunity. So with that, I also would like to encourage you to join us monthly. Next month, we'll be covering a subject near and dear to us all, caring for our workforce housing, not your Section 8 housing. So be sure to join us. It's always the first Tuesday of the month, right up here, 5 to 7 p.m. That'll be February 3rd. You'll want to be a part of that as well. Any Community Affairs Council members in the room? By a show of hands. Any Community Affairs Council members in the room? Because that's who helps put this on with us. Michael Bolon, you're in the house. You're on the Community Affairs Council. How about Chamber Board members in the room? Can I just show of hands, Chamber Board members? Big shout out and thank you for that as well, for your support in making this happen, and great connections with our legislators and our partners. And to that note, I'd also like to introduce our key panelists tonight. So, joining us, having served as more than one time prior in the House of Representatives and from 1999 to 2005, and then as the former majority leader from 02 to 03, please welcome Senator Tim Knopp. I want to point out he will be serving this year, thankfully, we appreciate this, on the Senate Education Committee, the Healthcare Committee, and the Workforce Committee. Is that correct?
That is.
Thank you. Also joining us this evening, he's hiding now. He's at the bar. No. Really appreciate the fact that he's put his ring in the hat more than once. As many of you know, he was both the Republican and Independent nominee in the 2000 election for Secretary of State. And now this last year has gone on to service as representative for District 54. Please help me welcome Representative Buehler. Tim and I had a running joke earlier that we thought it would be fun to make sure everybody knew that it's not Knopp and Knute, you know? All that. That's exactly what he's lonely. Representative Buehler will sit on the House Consumer Protection and Government Effectiveness Committee, Healthcare Committee, and Human Services and Housing Committee. So again, thank you for being here. Representative Buehler. And also joining us this evening, clearly somebody who has been representing our community at a new level, a great history in his past, serving in a variety of roles, including, many of you do not know, he is and was a scientist, an investigative journalist. He has been and is often, but has been in the past, a policy advisor. He has been involved in the legislative issues since 2009. Joining us tonight, contract lobbyist with Kancler Consulting and the City of Bend's own lobbyist, Erik Kancler. Big round of applause. Gentlemen, on that note, teeing it up, did I miss anything? All right. We have about 3 minutes that we'd love to hear your overview of priorities that you sense are out there. Just to get started, I know I heard the giggles, and then we'll get out to the crowd and facilitate some Q&A. So Senator Knopp, we'd like to start with you.
Well, thank you for being here. Really appreciate it, especially Steve Buehler and Charlie Miller there for sponsoring this event. This is a great event for us to come and share our thoughts with you and hear from community members about what's happening. And what I'm going to focus on this session is very similar to what I focused on last session, and that is jobs in the economy, education, including OSU Cascades, and making sure that those get funded, making sure that you all get the health care that you're paying for, because there seems to be a lot of people who are upset out there about the current state of affairs. Obviously, we're going to be dealing with Cover Oregon in this legislative session. My goal is to make sure that gets shut down and we stop wasting money, and that we move towards some accountability and put that responsibility in an agency that is accountable to the governor and also to the legislature. Beyond that, there are issues, big issues in Bend in Central Oregon, like affordable housing. And I'll have a bill discussion that will attempt to make sure that the recording fees that are funding affordable housing actually stay in the community in which they're generated, because Central Oregon is generating about 25% of the revenue and getting about 0.2% of it back, to the tune of, we generate $3 or $4 million and we've gotten about $200,000 back. And I've said before, and I will say again, Bend and Central Oregon cannot afford to build affordable housing in Portland, because it doesn't really help the community here. And we have, as you all know, an acute need for affordable housing. So that's going to be a critical issue. I think many people think that we're done with PERS. I think we are not. I think more needs to be done with that, and specifically, I really believe that we're going to need a new plan for people who are newly hired in government. Ultimately, I think that's going to be a necessity. And then there are some issues that I would like to take on this session, including extending the senior property tax deferral program. I think that's an important program. Currently has a sunset on it. I just want to remove that sunset. Seems like an easy thing to do, but unfortunately not so much. So there are a lot of things and a lot of issues that we're going to be working on this session. Most important thing is that we hear from you, and you can contact us, and feel free to email or call or text. I'm a texter, man. So yeah. Who would have guessed? So we want to make sure we're hearing from you, and I think it's great that I've got an excellent partner here in Bend, and the new representative, Buehler. He has big shoes to fill with Jason Conger, but I am confident that Knute is going to fill those shoes, and he is such a fantastic thinker, and I'm looking forward to serving with him. So I'm going to pass this over to Dave.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. I really appreciate it. And, I'd like to first thank everyone for coming out on a weeknight. It's dark out there, but I appreciate you taking the time to come out and engage in your community. I think it's so important that we all become engaged and pay attention to these issues. Second big thank you to the Chamber for doing this, to being the convener, to make it easier, make it fun. Jim, you do a great job with this.
Thanks.
And both Tim and Erik, thanks for getting me up to speed. Erik and Tim spent a lot of time, with this rookie, teaching me the ropes, and I have a lot more ropes to learn. I kind of feel like I'm going off to college. I've got my apartment that's only going to be there for 6 months. I have my syllabus. I went through orientation. So, it's like, I've done this before somewhere. And I told Patty, on the weekends I'll be bringing home the dirty laundry also. We've got it all wired well. My priorities, the first thing truly is to learn. Learn from these guys. Tim's been there a long time. Learn the relationships, make those bipartisan relationships, know how the sausage is made, know where the legislation comes from, learn the issue that people are interested in. That will take some time, to be fair. But after that, I also expect to get some things done. I think we all see the three big things that we really need to focus in this legislative session. First is education. I think K through 12, we have good schools in Bend, but we need to have world-class schools. We need to get there. We need to support OSU Cascades and make sure it's successful in growing on a regular basis here. And then integrate those two things. Integrate K through 12 in a great higher education system. I think that's something the governor is interested in, the whole P through 20 concept. We need to make that a reality if we can as legislators. We need to have more resources to STEM, science, technology, math. Those were the jobs of the 21st century, and we got to make sure our kids are prepared for them. But also we need to have the opportunity for kids to have technical training, which I think we need to invest more in. And then the economy. Certainly our economy goes hand in hand with a high quality education system. And I think we all feel that the economy is getting better, but my concern is that too many people are being left behind. The middle class is being hollowed out in the new economy of the 21st century, and we've got to make sure that doesn't happen. And I think Bend and Central Oregon really can lead the way in trying to prevent that. Having those high quality manufacturing jobs, the craft brewing industry, secondary wood products, secondary agricultural products. I think all those are things that we can start having those high quality middle class jobs that can support a family, which I think we all desire. And the third thing, the thing that's kind of my real area of expertise is healthcare. We all see our healthcare system in this country going through major transformation, and unfortunately in this state it hasn't gone all that smoothly, as Tim has watched and called out many times. So I think those are the three real areas of focus, and we have to do that, all three of those things, in a bipartisan way, that we are focused on solving problems and not just calling out people's errors. And I think that's a cultural change that needs to happen, not only Salem, but across the country. And I think people like Tim and I can lead that change in the culture of Salem. So thank you very much. I look forward to your questions.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you to Jamie. Thank you to the Chamber for hosting the event and for the invite, the opportunity to talk with you, and for putting on so many excellent events throughout the year, every year. It's an honor to sit here next to Senator Knopp and Representative Buehler. We've had many conversations already, and I'm sure we're going to be working together very closely throughout the session. Thank you to all of you for your interest. I think that this is going to be a really big session for the city of Bend, frankly, for the community of Bend. And it's very encouraging to see this level of interest. Frankly, I think it's going to take some community involvement to move a lot of our shared interests forward. So thank you for attending tonight. So I'm a contract lobbyist. I have frankly, the bulk of my work is representing the city in which I live, which is an honor and a pleasure for me. I represent a couple other cities. I represent the fisheries realm, and I'm just started now doing pro bono lobbying for Neighbor Impact, lending a hand to the affordable housing crisis that we're facing locally. So I want to focus, however, on primarily on my work with the city of Bend and on the things that we're looking at that are of importance to the community, which I think can be most easily summed up by saying we're really looking at how we provide the underlying framework for economic development. A lot of times this is the stuff you don't see. It's sewer, it's wastewater, it's transportation, it's tax incentives, and all kinds of different things that are out there to help provide the basis and incentivize economic development and the things on which it relies. At present, the city is in the final stages of putting together a formal priority list. That's going to come here pretty quickly in the week or two before session begins. At this point, what I'll be talking about are the issue areas that we're looking at this point, short of formal priorities. So one of the big issues for us and for this community this session is going to be in transportation. Many of you may know that there's a transportation package that's been endorsed by a broad range of stakeholders, including the governor. And there are a couple of components to it. The primary driving force behind it is modest increase in revenues at the state level to help stem the tide of maintenance issues that we're facing and to plan for growth in the future. So this is going to be a pretty political issue. It's going to be a pretty heavy issue, one that I think is pretty important for this community. Affordable housing is obviously a key, and I think in the last couple of days I've inventoried about 20 different policy proposals that various people have that stand some chance of at least gaining hearings and attention. It's not just an issue specific to this community, although it's one that's felt acutely in this community. So from the city side, there's a number of things that we're going to be looking at involving incentivizing the development of affordable housing units, very wonky sounding programs like the vertical housing development zone and nonprofit low-income housing property tax exemptions and and brownfield tax abatements, ways in which we can not just incentivize affordable housing, but also provide land supply on which they rely. Speaking of that, brownfields and industrial lands, we are working on a UGB expansion. As everybody knows, it's been a long time coming. We're committed to the local process and trying to expeditiously get that finalized as soon as possible. We're also looking to figure out how we can utilize the land we have within the current UGB as efficiently as possible. And I think there are significant opportunities for revitalizing brownfields, for pursuing industrial development, and there's a number of proposals moving forward that we'll be looking at in that realm as well. Water resources, this is going to be a huge session for water resources. As you probably all know, the Deschutes Basin is pretty unique. We face a pretty strict mitigation standard. There really is no such thing as a new water right in this basin. We have to be very creative in how we allocate, how we reuse, how we conserve water resources in order to ensure that we have adequate supply for economic development and future growth. And so this session, the governor has about $50 million for water supply projects in its budget through the Water Resources Department, through a variety of different funding sources. And we're going to be putting a lot of effort in trying to realize those funding opportunities and then bringing some of those resources home to Central Oregon so we can plan for future water needs. The second priority within the water realm is securing state funding for addressing on-site septic issues. We have a lot of on-site septics serving individual homes within the city of Bend. There's a lot of public safety issues, groundwater issues. We're really looking to figure out how to resolve those issues, how to connect to sewer, and looking for support from the state, which is sort of a novel concept in this realm, so that we can focus our resources on addressing core priorities within the urban interior and freeing up capacity for future economic development. There's a number of wonky issues in the finance and revenue realm. I won't get into them in too much detail. Local improvement districts, urban renewal areas, a variety of financial mechanisms that we use to critical tools, frankly, for making local improvements throughout the city. There's going to be a number of big tax revenue issues. I think central assessment is a huge issue for this region that affects a lot of the rural communities in particular. It's going to be an effort to balance the needs largely of cable providers with the communities that they ultimately serve. And we're also going to be looking at incremental property tax reform. This is a very controversial issue. Obviously, there hasn't been a large state-level initiative put forth this session from the governor or anybody else, but there are a few smaller issues that the League of Oregon Cities is putting forward that would allow cities to modernize the way they collect revenue from property taxes. None of them are going to be easy. They're all conversations that need to be had. Lastly, on public safety, we're looking to see about getting funding from the state to address the oil train issue. I'm sure you've all seen the oil trains, the volume that's been going through Bend presents potential safety risks. So we're going to see about getting some additional funding for incident responses, incident response and material caches. We'll be looking at privacy issues, and I'm sure having a lot of robust conversations about the ways in which we need to balance the need for local control and crafting policies that work for individual communities with the very real privacy concerns and the political expectations at the state level. So that's sure to be an interesting conversation as well. So that's a quick lens, a few of the issues. Again, very sort of nuts and bolts things that the city is doing to provide for basic community needs and stable and healthy economic environment. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, show of hands, how many people in the room already know they have questions they'd like to pose, things they'd like to hear out there? Fantastic. We want to get to you right away, and I also want to remind everybody that on your seats are index cards. Some of you are not the type to stand up and ask a question publicly, or you'd like somebody else to do it. We'd be happy to have you write it down and pass it forward. So I saw a couple of hands back here. Go to you. Let you start. Go ahead and introduce yourself and pose your question, madam.
Hi, good evening. My name is Kim Curley. I work for Commute Options. We're a nonprofit based here in Bend, but we work in 9 Central Oregon counties. So talking about rural transportation issues and funding, we're looking at pretty much running out of money to pave our streets and make sure that our sidewalks are connecting to transit and other amenities. What are some of the things you're hearing about the transportation package in particular, and maybe more local efforts?
You guys have a particular eagerness to field that?
Who's ready to tackle that?
I'll take a stab at that. So the way that this package has shaped up thus far is via a group called the Oregon Transportation Forum. It has a very broad membership of its board, and I think there's about 35 members throughout the state. So I've been representing the city of Bend on the OTF, and frankly, one of the issues that has been of most interest to me, of most concern to me, is as that group goes through the process, not just of shaping the package that's heading to the legislature, but as the legislature vets that package, I want to make sure that they really seize on the idea of geographical equity and making sure that we're looking at a transportation package that doesn't just impact the Valley, Portland, and Eugene areas in positive ways, but actually impacts the entire state in positive ways. So that's a conversation, that's a perspective that's been very well received by the leaders of the OTF. I've been having a variety of conversations with our delegation as well, brainstorming, figuring out how we're going to address the geographical equity question. A big part of what's moving forward right now through ODOT and through the governor's office in particular relates to multimodal, intermodal, bike-ped connectivity, which is, of course, an important component of the overall transportation system. From Ben's perspective, we're looking at the full suite of needs. So to the extent that there is a desire within the community, whether from commute options or other folks, to collaborate and help us better assess what can be useful in this city, and that's a conversation that's worth having.
Knute doesn't want to handle that particular issue. Neither Knute or I are on transportation, right? So we will not see any transportation package until it probably pops up on the House or Senate floor. And all I know about that transportation package I received from Erik Kancler, who is doing his job as a lobbyist for the city of Bend. So I think it's going to be an ongoing conversation. Clearly, there is, you've driven on some of the roads here lately. You may have lost your car in a pothole. There's some serious maintenance issues that need to take place, and so how to do that, I'm sure the state is wishing they had their $170 million back for that bridge planning that they did, because that would have solved a lot of problems. But if we can get government to stop wasting money and actually invest in it in things that matter, we're going to be doing, I think, yeoman's work. And so I think that's generally our focus, is to make sure that we're investing in infrastructure and things that matter. And so I think, as with many things, the devil's in the details on any transportation package. I've voted for them, I've voted against them. So it just kind of depends on what it looks like coming out. And we, again, look forward to hearing from everyone who has an interest in that issue.
So, Wes, I saw your hand up. Or you could get us going. Go ahead.
So I'm Wes Price, and I'm a local CPA, but I've been on about 1,000 committees, it feels like, in and around the city issues. When it comes to the urban growth boundary, I've been involved this time around with one of the technical advisory committees. There are several people in this room that are sitting on those technical advisory committees. It is an entertaining and weird process to go through and do planning. Are there any proposals coming along at the legislative level to deal with land use issues and to streamline the process? It is going to be 18 years by the time we started the process to the time we finally get it done, and that seems excessive.
I can tell.
So Wes, you've stumbled on a significant issue. Some of you know that in my other life, in my other job, I I'm the Executive Vice President of Central Oregon Builders Association, and we deal with this, our members deal with this on a daily basis, and it is a significant issue for Bend especially, because as Wes has indicated, it'll be at least 18 years by the time we from start to finish, and so you kind of have to start over again. But we need to have some streamlines. So I have a couple bills that I'm going to put in. I know there are others that will try to streamline this process. We're getting a little bit of interest from the governor, and there's some things that are going on right now in terms of rulemaking, and they're wanting us to wait and see if those make a difference. But the bottom line is this, is that at current absorption rate, we're about 2 years from ending up with really no lots in town, so that's either a moratorium on growth or it's skyrocketing prices, and only those who can afford to pay exorbitant prices for land will be able to be here. And I don't think that's the kind of community we want. I think we want a diverse community that has low income, middle income, and high income people, and good mix, and that we're not all segregated into different spots. And so it is a huge issue. It is on my agenda, and I'd be happy to see some significant progress on this. I think we're beginning to get traction. There was a little bit of a grand bargain from a court case on land use up in the metro area, and several other communities are now interested in something similar. I think, honestly, if nothing happens this session, I think we need to be back there in the 16th session with the Central Oregon Grand Bargain, because if you run out of land, you're going to affect a significant amount of jobs in this region, and that is going to be painful for everyone. And so I don't think anybody wants to see that happen. So I'm hopeful on this issue, but we need a lot of voices out there that are saying it's time to fix it. It's time to move beyond where we've been, which is basically kind of stalled out and kind of chasing our tail in a circle, going to LUBA and appeal after appeal after appeal, and millions of dollars spent by the city. I mean, the city would have enough money for maintenance of our roads today if they didn't spend $7 million on a urban growth boundary plan. So, I mean, those are choices that we're not being allowed to make because of state regulation, and so it needs to be fixed. And so, thanks, Wes. That's definitely on my agenda.
Yeah.
Certainly, Tim is the expert in this delegation on this issue. That I hear frequently about it is causing a lot of repercussions as that balance between supply and demand of land gets so out of whack. And the biggest concern right now is affordable housing, and we all feel that in our places of employment, getting people to actually take jobs, especially entry-level jobs, and be able to live in Bend, and increasingly in Central Oregon is going to be hard. Oregon has a reputation for a sterling land use process, but I think that that shine is going away as we see these long durations of the process going over decades. I think we also see the problem with the amount of money and the effort, and we're not coming out with good results. It's not a good result when it takes a legislative fix to get through the land use process. That's not a good process. There's much to do. I think the one-size-fits-all land use process that we think that Central Oregon is very much like Willamette farmland, that just doesn't work for the state, and we have to take a more regional process. I think the other thing that we need to do is there's key assumptions that the models for the urban growth boundary are built upon in terms of population growth and density and miles traveled. Those assumptions are made, but they can be called out at the very end of the process. This should be a stepwise process so that we don't get all the way to the end of the process before we question those basic assumptions. So there's things that we can do to help facilitate that process. But it's clear we all need to look at it carefully. Unfortunately, there's been a work group now for 4 years. 4 years they've been tasked with looking at the urban growth process. I'm still waiting to see what their proposal is to redo it. That's in itself, there's something wrong with our political culture when it takes 4 years to hear back from the work group to fix a broken process. So we've got to change that type of culture.
Mm-hmm.
So those that know me know that I'm frankly a strong proponent of the land use system, and I've worked as a land use advocate in the past, but I think it's pretty clear to me and practically everybody that's paid attention to the urban growth boundary processes in this state that it's a component of the land use system that is not working. It just isn't working. There's a small handful of cities right now, Bend being one of them, the city of Woodburn, which has been 17 years into a land use process to expand the urban growth boundary. They've been to the Court of Appeals twice without it, and they received no clarity on how to proceed. The Court of Appeal, or the Supreme Court declined, unfortunately, to clarify the issue. And there's a couple others, Newburgh, McMinnville, perhaps Scapoosh, that are going to be going through and are going through these same sorts of issues. And these are laborious processes. They're not supposed to be a simple process, but they need to be a lot simpler and a lot clearer than they are, because it is frankly ridiculous. So there was a piece of legislation passed in 2013, House Bill 2254, not that the number matters, that is endeavoring to lay out a new track for each of the expansion processes that, if successful, will allow cities to more often bring in moderate amounts of land, and if it works, it'll be a lot cleaner. That's probably another 2 to 3 years out in the rulemaking process. The first cities that come through that process are going to get hit with novel land use appeals, most likely, because it's an entirely new system. And it's frankly, it's a track that makes no sense for the city of Bend until it's been thoroughly vetted and until we found a way to get our inventory current. So as I mentioned before, we're very committed to the local process. We're certainly I'm working with the agency, with legislators, to make sure that everybody understands the importance of getting this done. Because I do think, again, if we're back here in a few years, if Bend has gone to the Court of Appeals and things have deteriorated, then the circumstance is going to change. So we'll be doing our work out in Salem, trying to move the issue forward, trying to breed some education and some broad awareness of these problems, and hopefully finding some success.
Yeah. Saw another hand over here. And
hi, I'm Earl Gilbert Brown. I live here in Bend, and I'm public health director in Park County. Worked in Deschutes for 8.5 years. One of the things I guess I have a question about is whether it's oil trains or whether it's water or it's home visiting or it's WIC. The public health departments in Oregon basically were 46th across the country for funding the public health. And so I guess one of the questions, we do have a modernization of public health bill, which will be coming forward. And just your thoughts on the role of public health, funding for public health. I think part of it is we have to respond to communicable disease. We have to do all that work. And we spend a lot of time doing that, but the funding is pretty poor in Oregon for public health.
Chance pass the baton.
Sorry, that was
that. I think in the next decade, public health is going to have increased prominence and importance. And the reason for that is that the paradigm, the way that medicine is practiced, is going to change from treatment to prevention. And that's really the hallmark of public health. And so you're going to see your whole field really elevate. Along those lines, though, you also have to integrate. You have to be more part of the healthcare system, and I think the CCO model allows that to happen. It's not occurring very well right now. I think that's the real challenge, and I think those resources need to be, taken from the CCO and allocated in a way that's going to prevent people from getting sick, prevent people from getting diseases, and save healthcare costs in the long run. I think the governor is doing a good job in setting up that model in terms of outlining it, actually to implement and make sure it works. That's where he seems to struggle a little bit. And I think the CCO model has a lot of attractiveness, but it's not there yet.
Yeah, I think implementation on that is going to be the key. So it's really important that we hear from community members on that, because let's just say that government doesn't have a great track record as it relates to implementation, especially in the healthcare area. I think we all understand and remember the website issues and Cover Oregon stuff, and we don't want to see the same debacle essentially happen in public health, because with Ebola and some obviously major diseases, significant flu season coming up on us, we don't want to see our health departments and public health end up being gutted yet once again. So it's important that we hear from you because lots of times bureaucrats want to do good stuff, but the implementation stuff really doesn't work in the field where you guys have to make it happen. So we just want to make sure we're hearing from our local folks about how it needs to happen, and if it's going haywire, we need to hear about it early so we can try to direct it and fix it.
Other questions out there? All right, got a couple, Mike and then Tim, back to you.
Hi, I'm Mike Desterman, Mid-Oregon Credit Union. I have a question about tort reform. I'm not an attorney, nor do I play one on TV. So I'm not sure if I can frame this question appropriately, but I have run into situations where some of my clients have been sued, and I would say without merit, without any repercussions toward the person suing them, in the sense that they are not responsible for the legal fees in the event that they lose that lawsuit. So my client ends up incurring thousands and thousands of legal bills that could have been used to expand their business and hire more people, but instead they're mired in the legal process of trying to defend a situation that probably lacks merit and should have never come to the point where it is. Is there any potential legal reforms on the docket that may address this? I know that Idaho has a legislation that addresses this, so if you lose the lawsuit, you're responsible for the legal fees. Any input?
Who's going first? Did you say this?
Well, Mike, I've never been sued, so there's still time. You know, the doctor sitting next to me, this has been a huge issue, obviously, in healthcare, but for small business people, it's a significant issue. And I mean, I would like to tell you that there's been opportunity to make progress. However, the way the legislative makeup turned out, the trial lawyers are probably going to have a significant amount of influence. So I think it's unlikely that we're going to make a lot of ground. We did make some ground on a issue a couple sessions ago, I think it's 2013, where there were LLCs that had been kind of, the courts had determined that they didn't actually fall under certain protections, and so we were able to give them some protections. But I mean, the most recent and biggest court decision on this is the case that unfortunately went against Mount Bachelor, where you have these waivers essentially that you're kind of signing up when you pay for your ticket, and it just doesn't go for ski areas. This is a lot of places you see this, and the court essentially said, hey, kind of open season, feel free to sue away, because those essentially can't stop a lawsuit anymore. And so, I mean, you think about youth sports and I mean, field trips and college stuff and all the waivers that are out there that ultimately could end up in tort. And the last thing we need is for a major business disruption to happen because of you know, somebody went up and did something that probably wasn't a good thing to do, injured themselves, and thought somebody else should pay for it. So I don't have a lot of hope that we're going to be able to resolve that issue this session, but that doesn't mean we aren't going to work on it, because I've told people that just because you know, kind of things are against us doesn't mean that we shouldn't try. And I'm always happy to fight the battle, because that's what you hired me to do. And so you know, if we're having issues on a specific issue, feel free to bring it to us, and we'll try to find, you know, the best way to work it through the process.
I think Tim's right. The political realities are the chances of reform on the legal sphere are very slim, especially toward. Having said that, I am an optimist, at least a rational optimist, and I think the area where all of us can agree is really struggling is medical malpractice. I mean, patients don't get justice. The healthcare profession is burdened with a lot of costs in defensive medicine, which then filters down to a lot of small business people and their premiums for health insurance. And I plan to introduce a bill to at least have a trial on something called health courts, which is expertise that courts develop, like a maritime courts, where you don't have just a lay jury, which becomes very expensive in medical malpractice, not only for the courts, but also for the lawyers that are defending and fighting those types of cases. And I think patients will have better justice. They'll probably have more settlements, actually. That's why some of the lawyers aren't necessarily against health courts, and I think it will be quicker justice.
Tim Ross, I'm a director of our Early Childhood Child Abuse Prevention Program. And my question was really stimulated by Muriel's question and just kind of some follow-up around the prevention efforts in healthcare that you're interested in working with. So there's lots of ways to reduce costs, it's really important to reduce costs, and there's prevention strategies, but it's hard to invest in those, especially when money's tight. So I'm just curious what kinds of things you're looking for.
Certainly lots of things we can look at investing in prevention, but we have limited resources, and when you're looking at the public resources, that's really in healthcare and Medicaid, right? So that's our public resources, and the vast majority go to healthcare. And in that realm, the biggest opportunity for cost savings and prevention is our mental health care and addiction services. This state is horribly broken. It has been that way for decades. That's just not my opinion. That's the U.S. Department of Justice, who every year comes in and reviews Oregon's mental health care system and says that this is one of the worst in the entire country. Our statistics show that we have an incredibly high suicide rate in the country, and we have to reform the mental health care system. And that just dominoes down into so many other social ills that we have to deal with: homelessness, child abuse, crime. We have to get a handle on our mental health care system. I think that's the single biggest thing we can do to help healthcare costs and disease.
More questions out on the floor? You want to see a little bit of hands? Yes.
I'm Becky Johnson from Wall Street Cascades. I'd like to hear more about PERS reform. I was at the Oregon Business Summit in Portland this morning, and there was some speculation that the court case might come out reversing the PERS reforms. What will be the strategy going forward if that happens?
So Becky, if that happened, the only thing that you can do, because I think the legislature tried to pass things that they thought were likely to be upheld by the court. And we always try to do that, but we tested them a lot in '03 and gave them a whole lot of options. And in that PERS reform, we got about half of what we had asked for. And the court has continued to narrow our ability to fix that problem. And so when I was working on the '03 reforms, one of the things we did was we created essentially what is a Tier 3. For those of you who haven't been around very long, Oregon's Tier 1 PERS retirement benefits are about the best you can have. Tier 2 is really close. And so Tier 3, we dialed it back a bit. But one of the things we did is we wrote that when you come into that system, it can be changed, because that was one of the things the court said as well. There's a contract from the day they sign up, they get every single benefit, and you can never go backwards. You can only go forwards and add stuff to it. You can't take anything away. And so in that Tier 3, we said we can change it at any time. Well, a decade later, just over a decade later, more than half of public employees now are in that third tier. And so, unfortunately, the only way you could try to control costs is, one, create a new tier that has lower benefits, and to to take essentially to lower benefits for tier 3 and go backwards. And that obviously is not a first choice, is to affect somebody's benefits going forward when they're thinking that they have something and it turns out you can't do that. But the pressure on public agencies, cities, counties, water districts, universities is going to be so significant that services are going to have to be cut all across the board, because ultimately that's what that means, is the courts have determined you're going to pay those retirement benefits first no matter what. So we anxiously wait a decision from the courts. I thought we would have it by now, but I think it's going to come fairly quickly. And I have no idea how they're going to rule on that, but I think those really are the only options that we have left if they ruled against what was currently passed.
Well, Tim's worked for literally decades on this issue, probably knows more than anybody in the legislature, so I really respect his opinions. But I just want to underline the fact that if those reforms are thrown out, the effects on operations of governments through all aspects of this state are going to be profound. And I don't think people really understand the deterioration in services in terms of education, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of public safety. Anything that you value in terms of public services are going to be downgraded substantially, and they'll continue to be that way until it starts turning around for about another decade to come out of that hole. It will be probably its biggest implication for Oregon as anything else we've seen in decades.
I don't think it's inaccurate to say that to some degree the current budget presumptions are based on the success of the PERS reforms. So we're looking at a governor's recommended budget that I don't need to dismiss the assumption, but that frankly did take it for granted that it would be successful. I think there's already a lot of expectations that revenue projections are up and the state is going to be flushed with cash, and the legislature is going to be seeing a lot of proposals, a lot of interest in handing out money, and creating a lot of new incentives for programs. Most of which probably have great merit. But if this doesn't happen, if the courts overturn it, if the kicker kicks, that would affect the ending fund balance and potential spillover funding. We're going to be in a pretty big scramble. The co-chairs should be coming out with their recommended budget, I think, later this month. So maybe late,
probably
the 21st or something like that, and that'll be a continuation to a degree of the governor's recommended budget. So there is the potential for upheaval. There's the potential. Frankly, I think that the asks for funding from the legislature already far exceed the limited supply when you're looking at such significant shortfalls already in funding education, corrections issues, all sorts of issues all across the budget. So it would wreak a fair amount of havoc on the process, and there would be a pretty significant adjustment process this session. I don't think, and that would be a very difficult scenario.
So we'll go ahead and ask you, if you don't mind, that volume is up as loud as possible. We've turned off the fans, so you're already a hot crowd, you're about to get hotter. But if you would speak up even a little bit more into the mic, and those of you in the audience who particularly maybe have your backs. Who else has questions out there? I've got some I could tee up, but I'd rather hear from you.
I'm Katie Anderson. I am one of the owners of a management company here in town, and we've been really fortunate to have great growth over the last 5 years. We're finding it quite difficult to find employees, and you've touched on affordable housing. Most of our positions are middle-income positions, and we found that we've had to really go outside of the area to find qualified trades to come in. So we're sort of experiencing twofold, both a qualified workforce, but also that qualified workforce trying to find affordable housing. So, all three of you have touched on the issues. Maybe you could share a little bit more about the substance of what some of those solutions are for the area and what we can look for as employers to be able to communicate to folks that are looking to come to Bend and really support the growth of our company.
Who'd like to start?
I appreciate the question about substance, because it's going to take substance to solve the issue. And I've mentioned, as we've mentioned, there's issues with housing affordability across the state, but I don't think there's another area of the state that is facing it as acutely as we are. And it touches on a couple levels of what we need. One, at a more basic, vacancy, there's emergency shelter issues, there's low-income issues, and then there's workforce housing issues. Affordable housing is an issue that has a variety of components to it, and I think what we're going to be seeing this session is a number of different proposals to address different components of the issue. Some are going to be far-looking, some are going to be more immediate. Two of the far-looking issues, there was a group called Affordability, Balance and Choice, ABC, for affordable housing. And it was a broad coalition. They came up with this idea of a housing lens to actually inventory what's working and what's not working and report back to the state, potentially leading to changes in how the land use system works. Is it functioning in terms of actually zoning effectively for these projects? In some cases, you zone for it and something else comes up. State agencies are going to be inventorying their land to look for affordable housing sites. There's going to be a lot of, like I said, the $100 million, the $100 million that's in the governor's recommended budget doesn't have any specifics to it. Frankly, it came as a surprise to a lot of the stakeholders. So I would say that to the folks within the community, let's start thinking about what we would use a portion of that money for. What it's nominally slated for is it's a general obligation bond from the lottery fund, and it would go towards infrastructure that, transit, for example, that helps affordable housing succeed. It's not for affordable housing itself; it's for the underlying infrastructure. So I frankly think that where can you find a more compelling place with a more compelling need to make a creative solution for a portion of that $100 million? I think that's a conversation we should all be having at the regional level, and finding something to take forward and work through the legislative process.
I think there's a few things we can do. The first is really try to work on what Tim identified early in this evening is Central Oregon and Penn specifically not getting their fair share in the state's dollars that are allocated already for affordable housing. Essentially, they've used Penn as an ATM machine to fund affordable housing in the Portland metro area. We need to get those dollars back into this area. The second thing is that we do need to work on expanding the UGB. It's clear that we're not going to have affordable housing until we have more land. It's a simple supply and demand equation. Until we solve that, it's going to be very, very difficult to have affordable housing. And then your workforce needs, I think we need to encourage and also have the opportunity for more people to get training in technical and trade skills. We've undervalued those. We've had the culture here in the state that everyone needs to go to college and not providing enough of those opportunities. And I think what you're experiencing, what I experienced in my business is that there's a lot of those jobs going unfilled because people aren't being trained in technical and trade occupations, and we need to invest more in those areas.
Katie, were you thinking about job training for your employees or workforce training?
Yeah, we've had to invest a significant amount of money as a company in doing a lot of on-site, on-trade training, primarily because we're not able to hire a workforce that has, we do a lot of construction or maintenance type work, and so in order to find those people, we're having to train them, quite frankly, and it's costing our company quite significant. Obviously something that we want to invest in our local employees, but to be honest, the last 3 positions of significant value that we've hired have come from out of the area. We've hired people from Atlanta, we've hired people from the East Coast. They want to live here in Bend. They love Bend. And that, to us, we'd much rather be investing in someone that is here, but we have to fill a position.
Well, after a couple of decades of disinvestment in workforce training and some people refer to them as, shop classes, that's my generation, right? Today it's career technical education, CTE, stuff like that. But we started last session with reinvestment in that. And so what you're seeing is in the high schools today, there are more of those classes. And thank goodness that we have education centers like COCC and OSU Cascades that are going to help us train our workforces. But that doesn't happen overnight. I mean, it takes years to build that up. And so as a legislature, part of what we're looking to do is make sure that during the downtimes, that those programs just don't get axed immediately, because those kids that are in those technical classes and those career training things ultimately are some of the students that will end up working in some of the venture capital stuff that happens that Dino and his buddies are working on trying to bring to Central Oregon and high-paying jobs, but we want to make sure that there's a trained workforce that's here and available so those people will actually come. And so COCC and OSU Cascades, I think, have done a good job at trying to tailor their classes and curriculum toward the training that we're needing. But I hope that if you see a shortage or a lack of something, that you'll talk to the people at COCC. They're actually here today, and let them know what your needs are, because they've been very responsive. Now, unfortunately, I think the governor has underfunded community colleges in his budget, and so we're going to be pushing for some more money, because we don't want to go backwards with the programs that we have, because the 40-40-20 aspirational goal that the governor put forth, not everybody's going to college. I think that 40-40-20 is probably like 20-60-20. So we want to make sure that people are being trained for jobs. And the one that we hear the most is that we have a lack of people who can weld. And there are jobs today, $70 grand a year, which is a pretty good paying job. And if you have the ability to weld right now and you've been trained in that, you can go out and make serious money. So an 18-year-old girl or boy right out of high school getting trained in that in 2 or 3 years, and they are making a very good wage, family wage. And so they'll tell you, oh, people are going more toward the high tech or the business stuff. But in reality, we're all going to need a plumber, we're all going to need an electrician, and we're probably going to need somebody to weld all the stuff that Charlie breaks when he's out four-wheeling and doing all that stuff. Somebody's got to weld that stuff, right? And so we got to make sure that it's actually more technical than that, that they train in all kinds of welding. But we actually have a training center right here that the unions operate in Redmond. They do a great job. And they're trying to partner as well. So thanks for identifying, I think, a problem that we're beginning to solve, but input from people like you is going to be very important in sustaining that over time.
All right. I didn't know who was first, so okay.
Hi, I'm Nikki Romer. I work with the Oregon League of Conservation Voters and the Central Oregon Conservation Network. And we've talked a lot about, I've lived here since '97, so I've seen the growth, and we know we're still growing, and we have the UGB that is going to expand hopefully in the next couple of years. That'll all be solidified. And so with that in mind, and all the people that want to move here, we have a limited water resource through Tumalo Creek. And I'm wondering a little more about what Erik mentioned earlier about a bill or a package that might be going through that would support or protect the water resources in the Deschutes Basin. So just wanted to hear a little more about what that entails.
Thanks for the question. So what we're looking at right now is about $50 million in water storage, supply, reuse, reallocation, conservation, a whole range of projects designed to be very creative about how we use waters, and it has all the different interests in mind. It has irrigators and agriculture and municipal interests and in-stream needs as well. What we're looking at right now is very lacking specifics. So it would be difficult for me to speculate one way or the other how Tomono Creek would fit in, if at all. Quite frankly, it's not an issue that's had a legislative intersection at the state level at this point, but I think everybody in the basin that has an interest in future water supply, whether it's, regardless of what your interest is, whether it's in-stream, municipal or otherwise, should pay attention to the direction that the governor is headed, the Water Resources Department. And it's definitely a commitment. I think it's something that he's put a lot of political capital into. And it's designed to suit a lot of different needs. It's designed to be collaborative. Frankly, that's about as specific as I could get on that issue.
Anybody else?
I could be less specific.
Really?
I know.
Not much.
Here, just real quick.
Again, I don't think Knute or I are on Environment or Natural Resources committees, so a lot of this stuff, we're going to rely on information from people in the community. So, Nikki has, sounds like some concerns, and I'm sure other people do too. If you have those concerns, talk to us about them, because we probably won't see those bills until they show up on the House or Senate floor, and it's too late to affect a trajectory at that point, because 99.9% of all bills that come to a House or Senate floor are designed by the majority to pass. They do not like to fail bills on the House or Senate floor. So, and if you don't try to affect change in the chamber it starts in, it's very difficult to affect a change in the opposite chamber when it's going back through committee, because they'll say, why didn't you bring this up in the other chamber? And so it's important for us to hear concerns or issues, or our drafting ability, at least unlimited drafting ability for bills, ends January 16th. So if you don't see us before then, we then have to tell you that you are on our list for what's called priority bills. And I don't know how many we're going to get this year. It might be 2, it might be 5, I don't know. But we are very judicious about how we decide and when we're going to use those, because when you're out, you're out. And those are the coin of the realm in Salem. When you have to do something and a constituent comes to you and says, oh man, I got this problem, and we got to fix it this session. And you go, oh, I'm out of bills, and so you have to look around and find somebody who's got one, and you're going to pay a hefty price in some way to get their priority bills from them. So if you have issues or questions or concerns, and since we're not serving on some of those committees that you may have concerns about, we need to hear about it as early as possible so we can try to affect some issues in these bills that are ultimately going to come forward.
Now I understand why you told me all the freshmen give you the priority.
That's right. That's right. I'll take care of them for you.
Yeah.
That's great. All right, hand it back here. It was Angela, wasn't it?
Angela Price. I want to shift the conversation back to education for just a moment and ask you to comment on what the conversation outside of Central Oregon is for support for OSU Cascades, and where we stand on funding. Is any of our funding at risk? Has the governor made any allocation in his budget for support? And the last part is there anything you can do to help?
Thank you. Been waiting for that one. I saw how that went.
Great question. So you two, I might be a couple of the evening over there. So I think that generally speaking, that most legislators that do not reside in Central Oregon see the need for a OSU Cascades. Corvallis is basically done. They've kind of capped what they're going to do there. And so if you're going to have significant university growth, it's most likely going to happen in Central Oregon. And so they recognize that. I think we're on a decent path right now in terms of funding and commitments. The governor has in his budget a couple $1 million through, can't remember the name of our final.
Yeah,
There's
Regional
Regional
Solutions.
Solutions, yes. And that would be very disappointed that I did not remember that. But OSU Cascades was one of the top choices for our region, so there's going to be some funding coming from that, and I think there's I think there's a likelihood of continuing funding through bonds and things as we build the campus. But I think a significant delay or the community breaking down and fighting could lead to other people going, geez, I mean, if they're not ready to go, we're just going to try to go to Portland or somewhere else and take care of needs, because as I believe as Mr. Kancler mentioned, there are already more requests than there are money. And that goes for bonding as well as just general fund dollars. And so it is really important that we work out our issues. We do that as judiciously as possible without significantly delaying the campus. Obviously people have concerns. They have concerns about location, they have concerns about noise, they have concerns about parking, and as far as I can tell, OSU is addressing those issues and giving the community members an opportunity to have input. And people ask us, well, shouldn't you guys have a say? And it's not really the way I operate. I operate more of in terms of a paid mercenary, so to speak, is I go out and work on your behalf. I don't tell you what you should do. I listen and hear what the community wants, and then I try to make it happen. And so when we get to the actual siting and some of those things, those are things that the community has to work out. Those aren't things that Knute and Tim say, oh, well, you're going to go there because we think that's where you should go, because we own property right next to it. No. So those aren't things that we are going to try to direct. I mean, we want to be responsive, obviously, to the community, but at the end of the day, this is really a community decision, and we need to be united in that, because I think showing that we are united to everyone else around the state, governor included, they're going to feel a lot better and more comfortable about those funding decisions coming our way versus just saying, if you guys really don't have your act together, we gotta do something else, because there's always somebody that is going to be making some noise for funds. And so we want to make sure that we're staying on the right path to keep funding. And thank you guys. I know you've made, a lot of people in this room have made huge commitments, so OSU Cascades, to make it happen. I see you all over the room. So thank you for that, because it wouldn't have happened without that. So that community support needs to continue as we move down the path.
Certainly, OSU Cascades is one of my top priorities, and in my opinion, I think it needs to be all top priority of the whole community. It'll be transforming for Bend and Central Oregon, not only in terms of the educational quality, the cultural opportunities that we have here, and also for our economy. So we all need to make it a high priority. I don't detect when I'm out there around the state that there is a decreasing of support for OSU Cascades, but I think Tim is right. The longer that the delay goes on, it's only natural that support's going to erode away. And there are lots of other opportunities for those dollars to go elsewhere, even within OSU itself. And I sit on the OSU Foundation board, and there is, also how should I describe it? A suitor for foundation dollars, and that's the new Marine Sciences Institute in Newport, which just received $25 million. So if we're not ready for those dollars, if we're not moving along, there is somewhere who is ready that's really close to putting up a new building that's getting a lot of attention. So we need to fix this problem, settle on a site, get the approval, and start putting up the building. I think we'll be fine, but the continued delay puts us at risk.
So I mentioned before when this was beginning that there's a number of issues that are going to require broad community support, whether it's the city or other things that we care about in the community, including OSU Cascades. And we certainly should never take it for granted that a good idea is just going to sail through in Salem. Even the best ideas that everybody agrees on, somebody needs to shepherd them through. And at some point, presumably, this conflict is going to be behind us. The success of the institution, however, is going to rely on some institutional understanding in Salem of the continued need for the state's ongoing support for the project. Seats change, people come and go. And it can't just be, I think, the institution itself making its own case. It has to be the broader community, the folks that are impacted by it. You've got the public-private partnerships that you hope to emerge, the innovation, so many crucial components. The community needs to step up and have a long-term commitment to make sure that the legislature continues to understand that its support is needed.
Dr. Johnson, before we move on, would you want to comment on any of that was brought up?
Yeah, I just want to say thanks for that statement, and I think you're exactly right that we need to figure out as a community how we can move forward and settle these differences. So we were in this position probably 10 years ago with a different governor who basically said, when you get your act together, let me know, and until then, don't come asking for any resources. So it is incumbent upon us as a community to sort this out. So while I have a microphone, though, if I could just say there's a really big football game coming up. And Knute won't believe I'm saying this, but there's 48 other states that would love to be in our position right now. So go down.
Question. Perfect.
So, Knute with 17 Ventures. So just to tag on to the OSU question, thank you, Angie, for asking that.
Speak up.
So that to me, that's the depth of sort of the importance of this campus goes way beyond just having a university in Central Oregon. It goes back to the question that the gal over here asked, which is, how do I get trained employees for my company? And I'm investing and working with dozens of companies in Central Oregon, and they're all clamoring to try to hire the kinds of talented people that they need to scale their businesses. And that's the way out. We have to train up people. We got to organically generate our own talent. You're not going to import enough. This is not an import-export market. So we have to train up enough of our own young people to fill those jobs. And the university is one of the few mechanisms that we have to do that. There's other ways we can augment that as well. But it's those people, it's that talent that actually allows businesses to scale, which generates revenue. The revenue that everybody in this room, we've been sitting here listening for 2 hours about, I need this, I need that, I need this. Guess what? Revenue is how you're going to get it. And so if we don't invest in the university and the training of these people, we're never going to get there. And we will just end up then going into this, oh my God, we have to either raise taxes or cut back, or then you go into that no man's land that nobody wants to go into. So I would argue that this university needs to get built, and needs to get built now, like yesterday.
Priorities. So speaking of new revenue, how are we going to deal with the new medical or the new marijuana laws?
There's been a run on Dorito production. So the grocers are out.
The police department's buying all those.
again, I do not believe either Knute or I on the special, and don't laugh, joint task force. The people who are serving are sensitive now to the whole joint committee issue. But there's a House and Senate joint committee who's working on the marijuana issue, and there are so many issues, serious issues with that ballot measure. And it's going to be probably one of the things that's going to suck a lot of air out of the other issues in the legislature, because that needs to be resolved. And I don't know what's going to happen with it, but again, I've already gotten some letters and emails of people who said, here's what I think should happen. That's exactly what we need, is citizen input about what you think should happen, why, and we're going to do the best we can to implement what the citizens voted for. And it's going to be just difficult, I think, for a lot of legislators, because we don't particularly like the idea of that being around kids and things like that. And so we're going to try to tailor legislation, I think, that's going to do the best it can to protect kids and push us away from them, so they have a little bit harder time getting at that, because the experiments that have gone on in Colorado and Washington, I would say at best have had mixed results. And if you listen to some of the policymakers, including the governor of Colorado, has said this has been a serious problem for us and continues to be. And so, while I would have preferred we would have waited to see what, let these other states go through the pain, I think there's going to be a fair amount of pain involved for our communities, because I think I think you're going to see more people in DUI situations, because that just doesn't mean alcohol. And so there's going to be significant issues that need to be resolved. And so I think it's going to take a lot of time in the session. And once again, because we are not on those committees, we're not going to see this until it hits the House or the Senate floor. And so if you have input, get it to us early so we can get it to the committee members who are going to work on it. And I know law enforcement has some serious concerns, and so we want to make sure we're taking those into account. And since I mentioned law enforcement, now I get to say that everything that's gone on recently, I just want to say that I support our law enforcement, our police officers in our community who are doing an excellent job, and we've had no police officers that he killed this past year in Oregon. So we all obviously want to see that continue, but they're doing a great job protecting us, and we want to make sure that we're giving them the resources to be able to continue to do that.
Marijuana is an enormously complex issue, and just to highlight one is driving under the influence. Exactly how you define that, how you test for it, the length of time that you're under influence. That issue alone will take an incredible amount of expertise, and a lot of it technical in nature. So if there's people in this room who understand those kinds of issues, I encourage you to weigh in, because certainly many of us legislators don't have that kind of expertise on this type of issue.
Okay. I quickly got a question. I need some more.
I'm David Allen. I'm an attorney in private practice. I have experience passing bills, defending bills, losing, winning. It's a process question. Taking on Representative Buehler earlier said the sausage making. Unfortunately, you're both in the minority. All of our constituents are in the minority on this side of the mountains. What specifically will you do to work across the aisle? What will you do? What will you trade to bring something home from Central Oregon, even if it's at the expense of your own promotion within your own caucus?
Good question.
Well, these people have paid in advance.
Well, that's easy for me. I don't trade. Once you start down that road, it never stops. And you need to, I think legislation needs to rise and fall its own merits. And so in terms of process, the best thing you can do, whether you're in minority or majority, is develop relationships with other legislators. And there's two things you can be in the legislature. You can be somebody who wants to get something done and works to get something done, or you can be a bomb thrower. And there's bomb throwers on the left and the right. And I should say, as I say that, I appreciate the tenor of this town hall, because our Senator Ron Wyden did not have the same experience when he was in Portland recently. So I think we are doing it right in Central Oregon. And so the process really is about building relationships with other people and working to make sure that you're able to get things heard, and you're willing to collaborate on issues and things that you care about, as well as things that people like Senator Roglin on the coast care about, or Senator Betsy Johnson from Scappoose care about, or I'm on committees with Dr. Elizabeth Steiner Hayward from Portland. I sit next to her in committee several hours a week, and there are a lot of things we don't agree on, but we choose to find things that we do agree on to work with each other. And there are times when I'll sit and listen to her, and she'll try to convince me of a position, and sometimes I'll get there, and sometimes I won't. But I don't get into the business of, well, I'll trade you this vote if you vote that way. I think that's a bad way to legislate, and I think you just need to look at the issue and say, is this the right thing to do? And if it is, you ought to vote for it. If it isn't, you shouldn't, and you ought to explain why, because ultimately we get to come home and explain to all of you why we did what we did. And so, I just think the process needs to remain as respectful as possible, and that we ought to create good policy. And because sometimes you can create good policy, or you